On May 1st, Pluto stations retrograde in Aquarius for the first time since 1798. So that's a big deal. In honor of that, I've got my good friend and astrologer Timothy Glenn back for round 2 of Pluto in Aquarius. My name's Laura Bruno, and welcome back. Let's get started. All right, Tim, where should we begin?
Oh, let's start off with just big picture. You started off with 1798. This is not like an emergency, but this is all really huge stuff. And so with the upcoming month of May, this is just the very beginning when we first have that station retrograde of Pluto right there in the beginning of Aquarius. Because, yeah, he's going to go back into Capricorn again. But at the same time, we're looking ahead just a little bit. We've got on the 16th, we've got Jupiter coming into Taurus, and then on the 20th, we've got Mars coming into Leo. So we're going to have this T square.
Yep.
So we'll talk big picture.
Yeah, and also I should mention that all of these transits that we'll be talking about are going to ping that April 19th and 20th eclipse. So that just brings in an extra energy of transformation. And then the Sun conjuncts Mercury on May 1st, also the same day that that Pluto is stationing retrograde. So Mercury's already retrograde. And so it's just going to be like a flyby with that crossing, but that I feel like that's a date to really pay attention to anything that comes up.
Right. And when we have those little flybys, they often activate or trigger, although that word has been hijacked by other agendas here. Once upon a time, we used to use that word trigger all the time because we look at the big transits, and when something flies through, like whether it's Mercury or it's the moon or whatever, that was the trigger. So, yeah, it's not insignificant.
Yeah.
Mars is the real quick one in this T square with Jupiter forming the T square with Mars and with Pluto. So it only takes a matter of days and Mars is gone. But Mars is a little potent, and he's like, okay, there you have the powder keg, and Mars comes through, he's the match.
Yeah. So just for other people who aren't keeping track of the exact timing, that happens on May 20th this year, but because Mars often acts in advance, we may start feeling that maybe even as soon as the 17th, or there's a new moon in Taurus on the 19th, which is a really potent one. And so just kind of a heads up that this is a little bit of a volatile energy that we're entering into in May. So what do you feel people can expect overall from this?
To expect the unexpected. This is going to be so wild. There are so many options for us, but the game's playing out in the external world. We can just tune that out to the best of our ability because that's not our game. We have opportunities here, especially with Pluto now ready to station retrograde. We can rewind, review, reflect, reassess, reconsider what we just had in our experiences of, okay, for us individually, what did we experience since Pluto did enter into Aquarius on March 23rd?
Mhm.
Watch the patterns. What did we like? What do we not like? What can we do about it within our lives?
Mhm.
Instead of spending our energy trying to push the river in a different direction out there, what about what we do? So that's really where I encourage people to focus here, because what we're going to have are just amazing opportunities within ourselves to readjust our own trajectory in this game, matrix, whatever we want to call this thing out here.
Hmm. So for people, I mean, most people are kind of aware of Mercury retrograde. Your electronics go kind of wonky. Communication may have some disruptions. I'm having to record without a mic here because I can't get it to work today. But in terms of Pluto retrograde, I mean, that's a longer stretch that it stays retrograde, and it happens less often than Mercury retrograde. So in terms of kind of what do we look for when Pluto is retrograde as opposed to when Mercury's retrograde, what would you say are kind of like the big themes that people should pay attention to?
All right, now this go round, Pluto is going to be retrograde for 4 months. So that's a nice sizable window.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're looking at Pluto, we're being asked to look at deep things because, again, Pluto doesn't like to do shallow.
Yeah.
And especially with what's looming right ahead as Pluto goes into retrograde motion now, again, pause, reflect, and especially when Mars comes in there, yeah, okay, do the sensible things. Yeah, hide the sharp objects and drive carefully and all that cool stuff. But we're going to be given opportunities to really start facing the deep, deep stuff. And that also includes the deep, dark shadow that is yet to be integrated individually and collectively here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
So,
in terms of kind of individual experience versus collective experience, one of the things that I've kind of circled is May 16th when Jupiter moves into Taurus. I feel like that could be a really volatile day in terms of kind of seismic activity on the earth or with the financial system. But on the flip side, if that's well aspected in someone's chart, I feel like that could be one of the bigger opportunity days of the entire year. So this is it's a level of consciousness situation. And then to some extent, I mean, we can't control where that hits our chart, but we can look at how could we experience this on a higher level. So in terms of like the things to be wary of with Jupiter, that would be what, like overconfidence, being too bold, being too assertive of like, I know the one truth, the one and only truth, versus Aquarius, there's group energy there, right? And supposed to be more tolerant. So other things that you notice with that date?
well, one thing we haven't touched on this time around, as we get Jupiter into Taurus, well, what's only like 3 degrees away at that point?
North
Well, the
Node.
North Node, which, in case people don't understand, the lunar nodes actually, for their natural motion, is retrograde from
Mm-hmm.
everything else. So it's coming back to meet Jupiter as Jupiter moves in there. So that is just one more thing with this massive T square going on, where we've got all this incredible power right there in the beginning of Taurus, and then we've got the Mars coming in on the 20th to be opposite the Pluto. Oh, yeah. One thing we can do here is be ready to expand our conceptual framework because Jupiter, among other things, is the ruler of Sagittarius, which, among other things, involves our overarching philosophy of everything,
Mm-hmm.
our perceptions and interpretations of life, the universe, and everything. And when it comes to the deep stuff, this is a time for us to really reflect on, well, let's just say, the lies we've been told. Yeah,
Yeah, likely to come out because Jupiter also is the planet of truth, right? Like that's of the planets, Jupiter is the one that is most insistent on truth. And I mean, truth can be a relative thing, and that's that tension with Jupiter squaring Pluto and Aquarius, but it is pretty likely, I feel, that we're going to have some deep revelations that come up in around mid-May. It may hit where with Mars entering Leo on the 20th, but again, Mars acting ahead of time, we may just get like the perfect storm on the 16th when Jupiter makes that aspect. So any comments on that, sort of the tension between that individual will of Mars versus more of the deeper fate level energy of Pluto, and then with that North Node involved, you get kind of destiny level things as well. It just seems like in some ways somebody's turning the wheel, and it's not just us.
correct. Yeah. And of course, we're approaching that next eclipse. What about Cinco de Mayo? What happens then?
Yeah, Scorpio eclipse. And that one is kind of the counterpart to the November 8th, 2022 eclipse, which was in Taurus. And of course, that was election day in the US. So one of the things that we may see come up is revelations or a deeper understanding of some of the things that took place last November. Now that could be personal or collective, but I do feel like that's going to be up for review in a big way in May.
Oh, yeah. And since we're talking South Node with this one, that involves our past, but this also then um, we would encourage ourselves as well as everybody else not to focus on all the dark negative karmic crap we brought in, et cetera, from our past. We did learn cool things as well.
Mm-hmm.
We gained from our experiences. There are things that we learned and we mastered and so forth, and so that can be our toolkit. But on a broader scale, that is using that Scorpio deep Pluto kind of energy, which is going to be like the volcanoes and the stuff comes up. And well, okay, this is more of this truth of what is our history
Mm-hmm.
individually, like our meat packs that we're walking around in. What's this deal with this DNA and all the information about it and within it that we haven't even begun to tap into yet? And then the planet's history, Earth's history. Oh, we're going to have interesting revelations
So you see more information coming out about history around the time of the May 5th eclipse?
and all kinds of history, not just
Mhm.
humans interacting, in their games here. What about the Earth's history that's
Mm.
been hidden from us?
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff out there that's been bring. I've been going down rabbit holes left and right, and it's like, oh man, the more I dive into this stuff, it's like, wow, what haven't we been told here?
Mhm.
But we are the creator when it comes right down to it. And so we can use these energies that are unfolding right now to get a deeper look into ourselves, our nature, our history, who and what we really are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be an interesting time. And during a Pluto retrograde, it's like, okay, yeah, we're going back. Just reflect, review,
Mhm.
reconsider. And with the opportunities we have out in front of us, then as we know from working with astrology here, it's like, okay, it's not like it's predicting what's going to happen, like what choices are we all going to make?
Mhm.
It's more like a weather report.
Right,
So,
bring an umbrella.
yeah,
Could get kind of stormy, but at the same time, in addition to being the planet of death and rebirth, Pluto's also a planet of power, right? And that can be the misuse of power, but that can also be reclaiming our own power for full empowerment. And so that is one, I feel, one positive use of Pluto retrograde is like reassessing and reclaiming our own power, and that includes power to determine which narratives are we following, whether that's a historical narrative or whether that's just like what we're told that we're supposed to feel about certain things. I feel like all of the energies that we have going on are really encouraging us to take that step back and reassess, where do I fit in this, and is this the kind of world that I want to create? Is this the kind of world that I'm choosing to create?
right there. We are the creator. When it comes right down to it, this is the one infinite energy field. There's nothing else for us to be. It's time for us to step into our creatorship and determine what kind of world do we want to co-create.
Mhm.
And yes, we may have this split, like the separation of the wheat from the chaff, that type of thing going on here, because there are those who don't appear to be ready, willing, and able to make a quantum leap in evolution right now. And that's okay. We may see more signs that there are going to be a lot of entities incarnate here who are simply going to go back into the cosmic recycle bin. And that's okay. I mean, how many times were we there?
Mhm.
So there's no judgment in that. It's like, and maybe they haven't done this game as long as we have, and they haven't even caught up to how many times we went into the cosmic recycle bin. It's just that there are those of us here who are more than ready to graduate from this game and step into choosing which of the infinite possibilities we want to co create now.
Mhm. And so Pluto stations retrograde on May 1st, and then June 11th moves into Capricorn. So in that time period between May 1st and June 11th, there are a lot of what I call pings or triggers, right? To both the April 19th and 20th eclipse, but also to Pluto while still in Aquarius. What are you anticipating in terms of kind of this final preview of Pluto and Aquarius before it moves back into Capricorn? Are there specific areas that you're expecting to come up, and like what would the shift be when Pluto goes from Aquarius back into Capricorn?
You used a magic word a few times here, and that's narrative. How many different narratives are there out here, and how many are obviously just manufactured? They're so synthetic, they're rubbish, and they're being broadcast out there all over the place to deliberately to mislead the people.
And also create maximum drama, which
Oh,
which is easy
yeah.
to do with things retrograde too, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Of course, we're going to have, we're also going to have Venus squaring Neptune.
mhm.
Okay. Whatever Venus does, she can add a soft touch to it. And especially with Neptune floating around in Pisces there, might be a nice time to just listen to some beautiful music.
And that's around May 4th, right? May
Yeah.
4th, May 5th, it'll still be in major aspect at the time of the eclipse.
Yeah.
So yeah, the touch of beauty, right?
Yeah.
That kind of energy can be a lovely antidote and a lovely reminder that as tough and like fighting against each other with that, especially with that Mars Pluto energy that'll be coming up later in the month, just to really lean into that creativity. That is a big potential with Venus square Neptune.
Yeah. And not only do we have the opportunity there to take a step back, follow that retrograde energy, because the big thing is that Pluto retrograde in Aquarius right now. And so as we go back over the little bit that we already covered in direct motion, it's okay, let's look at the opportunities and the possibilities that we would love to have in this Aquarian energy,
Hmm.
because we are really getting into the age of Aquarius.
Hmm.
And Pluto's really going through a fun process here for a couple of years to get itself established in Aquarius so we can start using this deep energy in us to bring it out and create from deep within ourselves.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's all kinds of nifty little things we can tap into. But also, one thing we haven't covered yet is that Taurus Scorpio axis.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like the world financial axis. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and the powers that would be, of course, want to try to hijack everything they can and manipulate and control and blah blah blah. But this is where we can determine for ourselves. Okay, this tool that we've been using here has been controlled and manipulated for thousands of years, and not for our benefit.
Hmm.
So are we willing to really do the Aquarian thing and step into our power? Because, the power of Pluto going into Aquarius is like, okay, are we willing to step into our power individually? And are we going to choose to create our own narratives, co-create our own narratives?
And so in terms of finances, how do you feel? I mean, I know it's going to depend on individual people, but again, that May 16th time period, I just have that very circled as a time of high risk, but also of really, big payout potential, depending on how people approach it. And so without going into like financial advice and all of that, which you and I aren't, we're not really in that whole field, but what are some things? How could people harness the potential of that period and minimize some of the more intense risks of that time period?
Risk is a huge one, especially as you mentioned before, Jupiter. Usually the only thing we ever find that we would call negative with anything with Jupiter's doing is people get too carried away
Right.
and they get too confident and they take too big a risk and on and on. But with the Pluto retrograde, it's like, okay, let's not go leaping into the breach here.
Hmm.
We've got a terrific opportunity to really assess what all of this is to us, to humanity. What has it been? What could it be? Etc. Look for our opportunities, but make a careful assessment
Hmm.
of the opportunities that come up. Because yeah, Jupiter's going to say, "Oh yeah, that looks cool. Do it."
Yeah. And
And
Mars is going to be probably frustrated and irritated and like, I just need to get out of this. And so yeah, that's what I think. Like, be careful, pay attention to opportunities that arise, but if it seems too good to be true, it might be. And there are going to be other opportunities, right? I mean, this time period is highly active. I feel like it's like seismically active. And so with that April 19th and 20th eclipse, it's going to continue to get reactivated for 18 months. And so some of that Mars square Jupiter energy, I feel is, you don't have to be in such a hurry, right? You don't have to hurry up and get everything fixed all at once, because it's not really possible to fix it all at once anyway.
right, and on one level, yeah, we tend to be a little impatient. We're chomping at the bit because it seems like a long, long time humanity's been oppressed and in this user unfriendly situation here. But what we're going to be able to do is make a step by step adjustment as we go, rather than trying to do it all at once. Here in Reno, I don't even remember when it was, maybe a decade or so ago, we had swarms of tremblers, tiny, tiny earthquakes that weren't really quakes,
Mm-hmm.
but people were really disturbed by that. So the question that came out later, as they were really, really complaining about it, was like, okay, would you rather have swarms of these tremblers these days, or would you rather have an 8.4 earthquake on one afternoon?
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's that kind of power in the shift on this planet right now. This is huge. And
Right.
so, yeah, you want an 8.4 or 9.3 right now? Well, maybe not. So make an assessment and look at possibilities. That's one thing about this energy of Jupiter. It's like, how many possibilities are there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, let's explore it, especially as now we are working into this Aquarian age. It's like, okay, what are the potentials we have? And who's the final one who determines what's going to happen with our reality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And another transit that we haven't mentioned yet, it's actually early June. On June 5th, Venus moves into Leo. And we've been talking a lot about when Mars enters Leo. But on June 5th, when Venus enters Leo, opposing Pluto, will still be squaring the North Node. Jupiter will have moved on a little further. What are the nuances with a Venus opposition to Pluto as opposed to a Mars opposition?
She can do damage control. And again, she can put the soft touch on things.
Hmm.
Mars can come through and just blast his way through and ruffle a lot of feathers and so on and so forth. But then give just enough time, and then Venus will come through, and then we can use that creative energy, that that beautiful energy that Venus has, and we can smooth out the ruffled feathers, and also then Venus is really a creative energy.
Hmm.
And so when she's in that same spot that Mars already came through and said, okay, we've had enough of this, she comes through and she can give that nice soft touch to it. And since she is creative and she loves the arts and so forth, well, then what kind of vision can she help us there, especially as she's then aspecting Jupiter there?
Hmm.
Because they work very nicely together
Hmm.
and for our
Even in a
benefit.
square, right?
Sure, in anything. Yeah, when, a lot of people do think that, squares are always bad.
Hmm.
um, I was lecturing at a conference back in the mid 90s, and Noel Till was there as well. And he was giving a lecture that I attended there on the hard aspects and how they can actually be user friendly if we take the appropriate action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. It was like, about 35 people in that talk, and most of them were astrologers, and most of them were like, fists are clenched, the arms are folded over their chest, and they're leaning back in the seats and scowling at him like, no, squares are bad. Squares are always mean to me. And Noel eventually got kind of fed up with the resistance that he was getting there. And Noel just took a deep breath, pulled himself up to his full height, which is 6'9". And he's a big guy, and he got a voice like Treebeard. And he just said, angularity equals action. Take the appropriate action, and the square will be your friend.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got energies like Venus and Jupiter, well, what's the problem anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
and the
going to
North
get worked,
Node's
and
in there
it's going to be
too.
cool.
Yeah, the North Node's in there. And of course, Venus ruling Taurus, I just feel like it's kind of supercharging the Venus energy. So as rocky as May could seem, what you're saying and what I'm sensing too is like we've kind of got the cleanup crew coming along where the rainbow after the storm, right? So.
Yeah, and of course the storms are pretty wild and crazy, but ultimately, what does a storm do? It purifies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so after that's gone, then okay, what's going to come out after the storm? The sun comes out, cool stuff happens. All right, so this is what Venus can do when she comes through.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
and also, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that the two money planets are seen as Jupiter and Venus.
Mm-hmm. But also Pluto rules the
Pluto is,
underworld, so there's that wealth connection there too.
yes, like the plutocracy, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But for the planets that move more rapidly through our lives here, yeah, Jupiter traditionally called the greater benefic, and Venus the lesser benefic, but they're always working in such a way that they don't disrupt us the way some of the other changes can be pretty harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially if we are resisting.
Mm-hmm.
But these two being involved here can help ease our own resistance to the shift.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole thing with Pluto, it's like we really are in a situation where we have an opportunity to go deep,
Mm-hmm.
deep within ourselves and deep within the experience of whatever this thing is that we're calling life in this realm, whatever it turns out to be. And have we really been told the truth about much of anything? We're going to see some things that, I'm already seeing it come up here and there. And, if people want to take the deep dives and go down rabbit holes and start chasing this stuff, it's lots of fun. You look at the history of the earth, like the mud floods
Mm-hmm.
and all the theories of Tartaria, which is kind of a placeholder name for
Mm-hmm.
civilizations who've been here and they've done amazing stuff. And it's like a completely different biosphere at one point. And, a lot of the indigenous peoples here, they have their traditions going way back
Mm-hmm.
into a completely different biosphere, etc. And now it's time to find this out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be fun. Like when that eclipse happened, the 19th and 20th here, depending on what side of the international date line we were
Uh-huh.
on. Okay, there was interesting some of the quakes that were going on. In fact, there was one we haven't had. I keep looking for something here in the Anglosphere or Western civilization, talking about this one quake that was on the Carlsberg Ridge, which is underwater, just under where like Iran and Pakistan are. You've got the Arabian Peninsula, and then you've got this underwater ridge there. And there are reports that there was an earthquake that triggered what they called a mud volcano.
That seems very Plutonian.
Yeah, just a bit. And so I've been watching for what kind of reports are we going to get on this, or how much is going to be swept under the rug. But I think we can expect a lot more stuff like that with these, especially with eclipses going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting, and it will, of course, affect every area of our lives. And when it gets into this, this world financial axis, um, we've been working with that for quite some time. And with the big aspects that are coming up here in May, yeah, we can expect a real shift because, if we look into what's going on out there in that game, we know that this is a huge shift, but we know that there are these beings who always want to take unfair advantage of it and hijack it. And so we end up with books like The Great Reset.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, but I don't see them succeeding in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, again, just I mean, they'll have that brief chance with Pluto moving back into Capricorn. That does favor a little more of the top down, but the tide is turning. The tide is changing. And going back to what you were talking about with what happens after a storm, just as a gardener going out into my garden after a big thunderstorm, I mean, there's so much electricity in the air, and the plants, you can just see them like, like they're like singing from the energy that is unleashed with all those negative ions and that fresh energy. So one of the things that I've been telling people is just prepare for change. Look at the areas of your life that you already know you need to let things go, and just realize that there's going to be a lot of energy to support that. And if you know you need to let it go, holding on to it is not wise. Like how many storms do you need? How many earthquakes do you need to say, oh, okay, I'll let that go? And I mean, we talked about that in our first video too, right? That the
Yeah.
resistance is what causes the pain.
Yeah. And after the storm, like if you've ever dealt with dogs, what do they like to do? Especially after rain, everything smells different after the rain.
Hmm.
It's like they need to go out and smell everything all over again because it's
Hmm.
all different now.
Hmm.
But since there is that energetic shift after a storm, there are so many differences that are so subtle all over the place. Wow. Okay. That's like time to sniff out all of our opportunities. And this is also a time to really be realistic about our dreams,
Hmm.
our visions, what we want to co create. Because we've been told for so long that our dreams are not realistic.
Hmm.
But now we get to start experiencing that they are.
Hmm. Well, and that's the beauty of chaos too, right? When stuff gets all mixed up, that if you are very attached to how it looked before, then of course it's like, oh, I have a messy room, or oh, I don't like this. Everything's out of order. But if you felt stuck in your life, or if you've not been happy with the course of where's the world heading, chaos can be a good thing. I mean, traditionally, kind of the top down authorities have co opted that, right? Like order out of chaos, but we can do that too. So, something gets stirred up. There's nothing actually stopping us from saying, oh, I'm going to be one of the people that benefits from that. How can I position myself in such a way that this is advantageous instead of destructive?
And really, there is no such thing as chaos because any of the systems that we've been dealing with, any structure or whatever, like when it is coming apart because it's going to reform at a higher level, and it's always going to be a higher level now, right? Okay.
Hmm.
So the patterning of that next higher level will always be implicate in what we're experiencing as chaos. But the thing is, we're trying to make sense of it in our old model,
Right.
whereas it's actually patterning coming in to the new model, and we don't have the experience or any of the understanding of that yet.
Hmm.
So, in fact, one of my favorite practices to do is called Wu Gong, part of the Imei Gong system from China. And at the beginning of it, one of the most important things is what they call beginning of chaos. And it's just like we're just shaking off whatever is there. And different moves that are made and so forth, but it's really not like, okay, now these are the strict Tai Chi moves that we do at this point. This is like shake it all loose. And at one point, one of the teachers was wondering, like, she had heard that, yeah, okay, this is supposed to help us go to sleep or wake up or whatever. And she was finding it was working one way but not the other. And so she asked
Hmm.
what was my experience with it. And I said, both ways, because it's like, okay, if I'm really tired and I need to wake up and get moving, I do that and it shakes off whatever the energy patterning was keeping me in that lethargic state.
Hmm.
And at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm really wired and my mind won't shut up or even the way a monkey mind does. And I want to go to sleep. Well, I'll do the same thing from the chaotic part of that Wuji Gong, and it shakes off being wired, and then I
Hmm.
have to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So that chaos can really help if we want to get out of anything that's served its purpose,
Hmm.
any stagnation, etc.
Yeah, any stuck energies. Also, if people are feeling stuck, I feel like this is a great time. I mean, in the northern hemisphere, it's spring, so spring clean your house, but spring clean your body. Get the dandelion root out, get that liver happier. Do a colon cleanse if you're into that sort of thing. There's just a lot of supportive energy to do that, to clear stuff away, and then that opens up new possibilities. It opens up room for changes that may not even be on our radar yet.
Exactly. And so if we're ready to make shifts like this and be open, yeah, it may be a little scary. And what's the scary part is we still have attachments to our security blanket from the old way.
Hmm.
But Mars coming through to really trigger things here at that May 20th, big times T square. It's like, okay, Mars is not shy about things. Mars is just going to say, go for it.
Hmm.
Especially with, and with Mars directly opposite Pluto, it's like, okay, Pluto can represent all the deep, dark, ugly stuff, but Mars says, face it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mars is not going to say, go hide in the corner, go hang out in the closet, get your security blanket and suck your thumb. No, Mars is just going to say, go for the gusto.
Yeah. Well, and another cool thing about Mars is so late April, let me just double check. Yeah, it goes exact on April 29th. Mars in Cancer, sextile Uranus and Taurus. But again, with Mars acting early, maybe a couple days before, but that energy, I feel like that is a big opportunity for liberation. And so if you want a clue into what energies might be most effective to work with when around May 20th, take a look at the end of April, because the veils are very thin there. We've got the Beltane energy, we've got Mars sextile Uranus, and so in terms of potential, like that's a non-volatile interaction between Mars and Uranus. And so that could be very big breakthrough energy or inspiration that then we act on when Mars opposes Pluto and squares the North Node in Jupiter.
And, we've talked before about how we may have similar things going on in one part of the solar system, et cetera, but the context is always different.
Hmm.
And there are things where people might expect, well, what's going to happen on that day? Well,
Right.
it's just opening the floodgates for something to shift on a bigger picture. And you're talking just now about our friend Uranus and our friend Mars. And we're talking a lot about North Node. Well,
Hmm.
remember August 1st of 2022, it wasn't like something was going to happen that day, except
Right.
the gateways are going to open because we had the North Node going back through Taurus, and slowly we had Uranus working its way forward. And on August 1st of 2022, they got right together. And on that very same day, Mars crossed
Yep.
over. That was like, okay. And we looked, we panned our cameras back and looked at the big
Hmm.
picture there. And we said, this is really ushering in a new phase of our lives here that we could call karmic retribution, or it's like those who've been abusing the power are
Hmm.
going to get their comeuppance, and it's not going to happen on in the first week. This is just like setting a new theme for times to come.
Hmm.
Well, now the time's starting to really come out, and it's like, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and that brings up an interesting point too, just this idea of dates, right? Obviously, astrology is very date oriented, but I do feel like one of the misconceptions is that when the transit occurs, like that's the event. And then if nothing happens that day, then it's like, oh, well, that was wrong. And so I like how you're presenting that it's like, no, this is initiating the changes. This is, and I do feel like if you pan back and you're reading the Sabian symbols of the new moons and the full moons, and you're looking at Sabian symbols of the actual events, like, where is this occurring? It does give you a more nuanced sense of which sorts of things are being initiated. And it's spooky when you track that. It very clearly, there is a story that's unfolding, and it does appear to be much more future oriented than past oriented, even with that May 5th eclipse. Even though it's a south node eclipse, so you're looking past, the Sabian symbol is very much about future orientation. So even when we're looking backwards, we're looking forwards now. And I just feel like that's encouraging, that's fresh energy. And so that's good news for anybody that's been frustrated. It's like, hey, there's change coming.
And not just change, it will be like plutonium, which is total transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do little tweaks and changes on the outside, but the deep transformation that Pluto likes to do, that's what's really being unleashed at this point. Real like metamorphosis.
Yeah. And do you feel like this could play out entirely on the psychological level for some people, or do you feel like it is going to have 3D world results also?
I see lots of 3D world results that will be kind of difficult to dodge. A lot of that's going to happen, but the main part is what's going on with us internally. And as we live our lives from the inside out here, okay, we're going to have a new paradigm coming from within us. This is going to be our opportunity to really step into our creatorship. And yeah, it may seem chaotic at first for a lot of us. And again, since I've done that Wu Gong stuff so much, it's like, okay, I can still hear Grandmaster Fu Weizhong saying, beginning of chaos, and guiding you through it, because there's a DVD video and also an audio track that people can just listen to him guide you through the process and so forth. So I can always hear his voice with that, and it's like, yeah, okay, this is really shaking off the old stuff that has served its purpose. It's done, and it's opening us up. It's like that storm. It seems chaotic, but it comes in, and yeah, we don't know where the lightning's going to strike or whatever else. But at the end, it's like, okay, the dogs want to go out and smell everything else because it's all cool. The sun's coming out and the birds are singing again. Yeah, this is going to be really awesome.
All right. Well, any final thoughts? We're trying to keep this around 45 minutes or so. Any final thoughts for people? Warnings, opportunities?
Well, the biggest opportunity that I mentioned earlier is this is a fabulous time to be able to expand our conceptual frameworks, because we have been sold a bill of goods in this world about who we are and when things happened and what happened and so on and so forth. And as we dig deeper now, a lot of this is coming to the surface. It's like, okay, we've been truly sold a bogus narrative left and right all over the place. So let's open up. This is the field of infinite possibilities. So for not buying into the standard narratives, maybe like turn those televisions off if you haven't done that yet. And don't buy into the narratives that old control grid is trying to get you to buy into. Set yourself free.
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, one of the other things that I've been seeing is just there's a lot of books coming out now, more and more on kind of near-death experiences and life after death, life between lives, and just exploring that. And with Pluto as the planet of death and rebirth, and Aquarius being networking, I think it's also a really potent time to explore, inner soul, deep inner soul goals. Why did we incarnate? Why are we here? And that we can, especially with both Mercury retrograde and Pluto retrograde for the early part of this, just that energy of being able to dive very deep and get to the root of things. I just feel like this is a really empowering time. So thank you for
and
suggesting
also,
this.
okay, also, we talked a little bit about last time, Saturn in Pisces now.
Mhm.
That's another thing that helps us not be trapped in old narratives. And a fun one that one of my friends came up with was, oh, yeah, Saturn in Pisces. Okay, it's not early onset of dementia. Okay. It's like whatever our old perceptions of reality have been, whatever narratives we bought into from officialdom of any kind out there, man, it's all just dissolving.
Yeah.
It's all cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. I'm looking forward to round 3 whenever we do that. But in the meantime, I will put Tim's information down below and link to our prior video that we did for kind of the intro to Pluto in Aquarius, and wishing everybody happy transits. So, all right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.